I wanted to become a tutor because you can always do obviously tutoring out of schoolness, but when they said this was for of African and Caribbean heritage, I'm like, this is amazing, because like I stated before, we need that representation, and they see kids like us, we're like, oh, we went to university, you can do it, you know? So that kind of helps them have the motivation to be like, okay, if I want to be this, I can do it. No one can basically hold me back from that, right?
I came back to CCACH as a tutor because it had an impact on my life growing up, and even being able to get to the point of being in university. Growing up, my brother was always academically gifted. I mean, like straight A's. And for me, I would be getting like C's in certain courses and be like, why can't I learn like he can? And early on in my childhood, I began to believe that I wasn't that academically capable. But then when I started being a part of CCACH and spaces like that, I started to realize that actually I can improve. I can be better. My grades started to improve. And of course, as we know, as your grades improve, you then can qualify for certain levels of education. So from elementary school and being a part of CCACH, my grades did improve. And then I was able to go to junior high and be part of the IB, International Baccalaureate program. As you think about all of the levels of educational achievement you have, and I reflect on it, I realize that CCACH was important to that. And so if I can do that for someone else and be a part of their journey, why not? And so, yeah, I went back and tutored in university.
CCACH selects its tutors by doing some outreach at the beginning of the school years. So around the end of summer, we reach out to the student organizations, the campuses, different campuses, if anybody's interested in tutoring, and we outline that we are tutoring for children of African and Caribbean heritage. And typically, the Black Students Association send people over and we interview them and find out if they're a good match. And also we have the students who are applying to be tutored, so they tell us what they need and we try and match them up to the best of our ability.
We use posters and social media to try and get to the young people, especially social media is that new phenomenon. And I think that we're trying our best to try and TikTok our way to get tutors. But really what CCACH does is we have them apply. So we put out our advertisements, posters for advertisements. We pay our tutors. It is minimum wage that we pay. So again, when we think about funding and the importance of funding, being able to pay a living wage to some of these tutors would be great, especially because it's a very part-time opportunity. So typically they tutor just on Saturday for a few hours.
I think a large part of the tutors are there because they want to help. That's how we select our tutors, and it's been working great. I mean, tutoring program has been around for at least 20 years.
As the lead tutoring coordinator, I would get to our venue at 9:30 and the program starts at 10 o'clock. So that gave me half an hour to set out all of the materials necessary and make sure that everything we needed was ready to go. Once that was set out and the kids started to show up at 10, they would be paired off, they'd go find their tutor, and they'd have a space in the room to work together and be able to pull materials, whiteboards, dice for math games, all sorts of things to make their learning engaging and fun. And they would work with their tutor for an hour, and then at the top of every hour, for 3 hours in a row, students and tutors would pair up and go. They get to meet each other first in October, which is great because they spent their first Saturday together, just getting to know one another, which is really important to build kind of that really close bond. And then it makes learning fun and easy when you're with someone that you know and that starts to get to know you. So it's really nice to see them start to recognize their tutor and be excited to show up and see that their tutor's there that Saturday and they're ready to go. This program is yes, people see it as a tutoring program only, but to me, the biggest piece is the mentorship and seeing that our university students that we've hired to be tutors are able to make an impact on our students who are going through the school system currently.
So one of our current board members, She came to Canada from Trinidad when she was, I think, about 11 years old, and her family was greatly involved with CCACH in terms of volunteering and Afro Quiz. She received tutoring, she was a tutor, and now she's a board member. And is it not a success story for somebody to have gone through the whole program, feel that it's something that's so important, that now she gives of her time freely so that she can come and be a part of our programming too?
So there's a student that used to be a part of the program. His name is Xavier, and he was a high school student when he joined the program, and a brilliant student. When I say like too smart, Xavier was too smart.
He was already a very gifted academic kid, but his mom was very focused on education, and so he actually joined the tutoring program really more so for mentorship.
He also played hockey, so he was an athlete, but it was important for his mom that his grades don't slip.
And so he needed help with understanding how to apply for scholarships and what's the best way to go through university and figure out, you know, the ins and outs. And he was still in high school at the time, but he was a very focused child.
When he turned 18, he turned to me and said, "Could I work for CCACH?" And I was like, "You're a hockey player, you don't need to work for CCACH." But he said the impact of the program on him through such a small time in his life, it was only a couple of years, was so formative that he wanted to be able to pass that along to other kids. So for 2 years, Xavier was a tutor, and it was so cool to see that full circle moment of being tutored and then becoming a tutor and supporting students younger than him.
He's in university now, doing very well, working with the Black organization. Over the summer, he came and did a presentation for the youth in our Dream Catchers program about the importance of communication and how you network and how that's important in your careers.
He was able to work with high school students on things that, you know, they were having trouble with, like calculus and biochemistry and things that, you know, kids would pick up for fun because they wanted a challenge in school. He was able to provide that enrichment for some of those high school students, but also give the same support that he received on applying for post-secondary and scholarships and that type of thing.
And he's just a go-getter. So whenever he talks and I see other kids like that who are just so focused that I'm just like, I want to write down everything that they did, and I want to call their parents and be like, "What did you do?" so that I can do the exact same thing. Because, you know, Xavier is just one of those kids who you know, just focused, knew what he wanted to do, and you know, pursued and got it. And I'm really inspired by kids who have a clear understanding of that. So I'd say he was a success story as well, who came through.
One success story of students that have come through the tutoring program. There's quite a few of them. I'm glad to share that I was a tutor for, I think, 12 or 13 years. I was one of the first tutors that started with CCACH in 1999, I believe it is. There was one student in particular that came in, and these kids were pretty good. And again, like I said, most parents would send them over not only to improve on their academics, which was something that we were focusing on, but sometimes just to share the space with other Black students and share, you know, their experiences in the schools. And so this kid turned around, started performing well, and I was invited to their graduation as one of the tutors because the parents recognized that we have had an impact with the students. And later on, it turns out that this student now works for one of the big banks in Edmonton, one of the big national banks, and they are giving back to CCACH. They've been able to sponsor some of our programs because of their own experience going through CCACH and how it helped them with their academics and them being able to be the best version of themselves that they could be.
We thought about what are some of the organizations that make a difference and have impact, especially at the younger ages, for the BIPOC community. And right away, being who I am and the story I've had and the journey I've had with CCACH being an instrumental part of my life, that came to my mind. And I thought, CCACH could be an organization that could benefit from the support of a financial institution, and maybe that could help create more opportunity for younger people that are learning through CACH. And so I made a connection between CACH and the financial institution, and we learned more about AfroQuiz and the education of Black history that was being provided to young people in Alberta, specifically here in Edmonton, and we got the approval to provide support. I believe it was the single largest donation ever provided to CACH from the institution, and it was just a real honor to be a part of that. It was an absolute privilege to be able to kind of facilitate that connection and hear about what happened afterwards.
And this is just one of many achievements that kids have had at AfroQuiz. As a matter of fact, actually at one point, and we lost track of this statistic, but every student that was attending tutoring at the time ended up at post-secondary institute. And for that ran for like a good 10 years. But I don't know if we have kept that statistic, but every student that was attending tutoring was ending up at post-secondary institution.
So that's one of my favorite things to come out of this program, is that we're starting to recycle now, and we're seeing our students become our tutors, and we're keeping things in-house, but we're also trying to help students on their own path and their own journey.
I believe it's important for Edmonton's Black community to support initiatives like CACH and AfroQuiz. One, because they're helping a lot of our youth get over the hump. So whatever the limitations there are, for example, my daughter is in a school that the classroom there's too many kids in the classroom. You can almost guarantee that she's not getting enough of the one-on-one type of attention that she needs. Whereas an organization like CACH with their tutoring program can help buffer some of this and add to your child's base of knowledge in terms of STEM.
In my life, I would just say a big thank you to CACH. When you look back on where you are in life and some of the successes that you've had and the opportunities that you've been able to step into, we owe it to the people that have contributed in our lives to help us get there. And if I think back to starting CACH and that representation I saw around me, that gave me the ability to believe that, hey, I can move forward as well and be a professional. If I think back to the time where Siani spoke to my father and I had that conversation about taking my education more seriously, that was a formative point in my life. If I think about my tutor Omarika, who is such a part of my life and so joyful to see me as a young elementary student wanting to learn, and how she would encourage me, or even my tutor Marika, who would incentivize me and be such a joy and such a funny tutor who I could learn from, and how she would sometimes even let me borrow her video game console if I did really well in my studies. And Siani and Martha always being present in the lives of my brother and I, even encouraging us and allowing us to come back as tutors. If I think about all of this, it's contributed immensely to my life, and I don't know if I would be where I am today without CACH and without these people that contributed to my life. So last thing I would say is a big thank you, and I imagine there's many other people like me that have benefited from this and would also say the same thing.
Akbar Houston Reese was a student of the CACH program. He came into the CACH program with Marika as his tutor. At the time of his entry, he was failing in the public school system. I think he was -D, and his parents were worried about his academic performance. And so Marika tutored him up to a -A over the period of years that she was tutoring him. And unfortunately, he died just as he was preparing for entry to the University of Alberta, which had already been arranged and approved. But prior to that, his continuous progress was the pleasure of his parents. You know, so they rewarded or they recognized Marika every Christmas for the wonderful job she had done as a tutor with Akbar by giving her a huge, the biggest basket they could find of all kinds of goods was presented to Marika every Christmas, you know, until Akbar died. And then at his funeral, she was recognized as the person who had transformed his life, because not only did she change his academics, but she changed his quality of life significantly in their assessment by inspiring him to achieve, and by other values that she imparted, that she encouraged him to uphold. So that was what the tutoring program did, and Marika, as the inspiration for Akbar, that was her contribution.